A hacker group has finally been caught for scamming an old man of $350,000 back in 2009. This was one of the craziest scams at the time, and it just kept getting crazier and crazier. The old man who was scammed was from Alabama. He got scammed by going to a simple website that seemed above board, but they managed to hack his personal information and took all his savings. But it gets even crazier because this website wasn't a random one. It was a popular porn site, and they managed to hack people while they were watching porn. This was obviously a crazy situation, and the FBI jumped into action right away. They started tracing where the money went, and eventually they found out that the money was sent overseas. And not only that, but it was sent to multiple different countries. This made the situation much harder because when money is sent internationally, it becomes a lot harder to get it back. But the FBI didn't stop there. They continued following the money trail, and they eventually found out that the money was being used to buy luxury items such as cars, houses, and jewelry. But even though the FBI knew what the scammers had bought with the stolen money, getting it back was still a long shot. To make things worse, the FBI also found out that some of the money had been used to fund terrorist activities. But the FBI wasn't about to give up. They worked tirelessly for years trying to track down every penny that was stolen. But the question everyone had at the time was, how did these hackers manage to steal so much money? Well, it turns out they used a technique called phishing. This is where they would send emails that looked like they were from a bank or another trusted institution. The emails would ask for personal information such as a social security number or passwords. And once they had that information, they were able to access people's bank accounts and steal their money. What makes phishing so dangerous is that it can happen to anyone. All it takes is one email from a scammer and you could be the next victim. That's why it is important to be aware of your surroundings and never give out personal information over email. The sad part about this story is that it could have been avoided if the old man from Alabama had been more careful. But at the time he was scammed, technology was still relatively new and most people weren't aware of the dangers of phishing. Thankfully, we live in a day and age where people are much more aware of these scams. However, it's important to remember that scammers are always coming up with new ways to trick people. So, you should always be on guard. But let's go back to the story. In the end, the FBI was able to recover some of the stolen money, but not all of it. The old man from Alabama lost his life savings and he never got to see it recovered. But the good news is that the men responsible for the scam were finally caught. A total of 7 men were arrested in connection with the scam, and they were charged with various crimes. One of them was even charged with money laundering, which is when someone helps another person launder money that has been earned through illegal means. The men were all part of an organized crime ring that was based in Eastern Europe. They used to run a call center where they would call people and try to get their credit card information. Once they had the information, they would use it to make unauthorized charges on the victims' credit cards. What's crazy is that these guys were scamming people all over the world. They didn't just target people in the United States, they targeted people in Canada, Australia, the UK, and many other countries. At the time, this was one of the largest cybercrime rings that had ever been busted. And it showed just how far-reaching these scams can be. But the question is, how do people like this even get started? Well, it turns out that many of these guys come from poor backgrounds and they just want to make money. They don't really care how they make it, whether it's through selling drugs or scamming people online. For some of these guys, it's just a way of life. They grew up seeing other people make money through legal means and they thought it was just normal. It's sad, but that's just the reality of the situation. Some of these people don't have any other skills and they don't see any other way to make money. In many ways, it's almost like they're victims themselves. However, that doesn't excuse what they did. These guys are still criminals and they should be punished. But it does make you wonder if there's anything that can be done to help these people. Many of these guys are very intelligent and they could use their skills for good. It just depends on whether they want to or not. As for the old man from Alabama, he eventually passed away without ever seeing his money again. It's a sad story, but it's also one that could have been avoided if he had been more careful. Thankfully, we live in a day and age where people are much more aware of scams like these. So it's unlikely that something like this would happen today. But it is still important to remember that scammers are always coming up with new ways to trick people. So you should always be on guard and never give out personal information to someone you don't know. But some of you may be wondering why the FBI didn't just shut down the porn site. After all, it was the site where all of the scammers were operating from, and shutting it down would have stopped the scam. The reason why they didn't do this is because it would have set a bad precedent. If the FBI could just shut down a website because they didn't like what was on it, then what would stop them from doing the same thing to other websites? There's no clear answer to this question, but it's likely due to a combination of factors. One of the main concerns is that it would set a bad precedent. If the government could just shut down any website they wanted to, then it would open up a whole new can of worms. Another concern is that it would be very difficult to shut down the site without causing major disruptions to the internet. The site in question was very popular and had millions of users. Shutting it down would not only affect the people who were using it to scam others, but also the people who were using it for legitimate purposes. It's also worth noting that the FBI didn't want to make the scammers more elusive. By shutting down the website, the FBI would have essentially pushed the scammers underground. They would have been forced to come up with new and more sophisticated ways to scam people, and they would have become a lot harder to catch. In the end, the FBI decided that it was better to keep the website up and running and to try to catch the scammers in the act. This proved to be successful, as they were eventually able to build a case against the scammers and shut down their operation. In hindsight, it seems like the right decision was made. Shutting down the website would have only made things worse. But at the time, it was a very difficult decision to make. It's a classic example of the saying, catch and release. The authorities knew that by not taking action against the website, they were allowing scammers to continue their operations. However, they felt that this was the best course of action in order to ultimately catch the scammers and put an end to their operation. In this case, the catch and release strategy proved to be successful. The scammers were eventually caught and the website was taken down. But it's not always that simple. Sometimes the authorities do take down websites that are being used for illegal activities, and it can be very difficult to bring the people behind those sites to justice. Ultimately, it's a very complex issue with no easy answers. The authorities have to weigh the risks and benefits of taking down a website, and it is not always clear what the right decision is. It's a tough balancing act, but it's one that they have to get right in order to keep our online world safe. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. If you have any footage of any strange or suspicious activity going on in your area, you can send it to the mail below and it may be featured in a future video. Thanks for watching.